I'm Tommy, 32 years old now, but some wounds never truly heal. When I was 16, my own sister framed me for theft, shed crocodile tears for our parents, and got me thrown out of my home barefoot in the dead of winter. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any knife. For weeks, I wandered with frost-bitten toes in a shattered heart, uncertain if I'd ever see home again. Then, fate intervened when my grandmother overheard something she was never meant to hear. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from. Hit that like and subscribe button, and stick around to see how family justice was finally served. Growing up in our suburban Pennsylvania home, life seemed picture-perfect from the outside. Our house was the typical two-story colonial with a white picket fence, the kind everyone associates with the American dream. But behind those walls, a storm was brewing that would eventually tear our family apart. My sister Stephanie was 4 years older than me. When I was 16, she was 20 and in her second year of college. Looking back at old family albums, there are dozens of photos of us playing together as kids. I remember following her everywhere, wanting to be just like my big sister. We built blanket forts in the living room, dressed up in mom's clothes, and rode our bikes up and down the street until the streetlights came on. Those were simpler times, when sisterhood meant something pure. Everything changed when Stephanie entered high school. It was as if someone had flipped a switch inside her. The sister who once read me bedtime stories began to look at me with something dark in her eyes. At first, I couldn't understand what had changed. The shift was gradual, but undeniable. When I started winning spelling bees in middle school, Stephanie stopped congratulating me. When I was chosen for the advanced math program, she claimed the teachers felt sorry for me. By the time I entered freshman year and made the varsity volleyball team, one of only 2 freshmen selected, Stephanie could barely look at me during dinner. My parents never seemed to notice the change. Dad was always working late at his accounting firm, and Mom was busy with her real estate business. They claimed to be proud of both of us, but somehow they always took Stephanie's side whenever conflicts arose. Once, my silver charm bracelet, gifted by Grandma for my 13th birthday, went missing. I knew Stephanie had taken it. She'd been eyeing it for weeks. When I confronted her, she cried and told our parents I was jealous of her new car. Mom comforted her while Dad lectured me about false accusations. 3 months later, I found my bracelet in Stephanie's jewelry box while looking for a hair tie in her room. When I showed it to my parents, Stephanie claimed I had lent it to her and forgotten. They believed her. That was the pattern in our house. Stephanie would take or break my things, spread rumors about me at school, even though we were in different grades, and twist the narrative until I was always the villain. She was beautiful, charming, and manipulative. She could cry on cue, and our parents would melt instantly. The only person who ever saw through her act was our grandmother, Grace. Grandma Grace was Mom's mother, a tough but loving woman who had raised 5 kids mostly on her own after our grandfather died young. She lived about 20 minutes away, and I often biked to her house when things got tense at home. She'd make me hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows, listen to my stories about Stephanie, and tell me to stay strong. "You have a light inside you that threatens her," she once told me. Some people try to blow out others' candles instead of learning how to make their own burn brighter. For me, photography became a refuge. When I was 14, Grandma Grace gave me my first real camera. It wasn't fancy, just a used Canon she'd found at a garage sale. But it opened up a new world for me. I spent hours photographing everything: dewdrops on spider webs, sunlight filtering through trees, portraits of Grandma Grace and her beautifully wrinkled smile. Photography became my escape, my language, the way I processed life. By 16, I was good, really good. My photography teacher, Mrs. Lawson, began entering my work in regional competitions. I won a few small prizes, enough to upgrade to a better camera body, though I still had to save for lenses. More importantly, Mrs. Lawson told me about a national competition for high school photographers that offered a $20,000 college scholarship to the winner. For a kid from a middle-class family with an older sibling already in college, this could be my chance to pursue my dreams without drowning in student loans. Little did I know that this competition would become the catalyst for the worst betrayal of my life. Junior year was supposed to be my time to shine. Despite the challenges at home, I was thriving at school. My GPA held at 3.9, I had a small but close circle of friends, and my photography was gaining recognition beyond our school. Mrs. Lawson had started mentioning my name to her contacts at art schools. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future where I could make a living doing what I loved. But as my star rose, Stephanie seemed determined to dim my light. What began as petty jealousy evolved into something calculated and cruel. The incidents escalated. One morning, I woke up to find orange juice spilled all over my history project that had taken weeks to complete. Another time, my favorite sweater mysteriously turned up with a bleach stain on it right before a school dance. Small things, but the pattern was clear. Then came the rumors. Even though Stephanie was away at the local community college, she still had connections at my high school. Suddenly, stories circulated that I cheated on tests to maintain my GPA, that I manipulated Miss Lawson into favoring my photography, that I was two-faced and talked behind my friends' backs. None of it was true, but high school is a breeding ground for gossip, and some of it stuck. My best friend Leah stood by me through it all. We'd been inseparable since 6th grade, and she knew the real me. Our families were close, and her parents often invited me over for dinner. They could sense the tension in my house, though I never told them the full extent of Stephanie's behavior. At home, things grew unbearable. If anything went missing, I was the first suspect. If something broke, my parents assumed I was responsible before even asking questions. Stephanie had successfully built her image as the perfect daughter, while painting me as the problem child. One night stands out vividly in my memory. Mom couldn't find her pearl earrings, a gift from Dad on their 20th anniversary. Stephanie suggested checking my room. The way she said it, so innocent yet sharp, made my stomach drop. Of course, the earrings turned up in my desk drawer, though I'd never touched them. The disappointment in my mother's eyes as she held them up cut deep. I knew denying it would only make me look worse. The theme was resilience, something I knew intimately. I'd been planning my photo series for months, scouting locations and sketching compositions. The centerpiece would feature portraits of survivors from a local women's shelter, their faces partially hidden to protect their identities, but their strength unmistakable. For this project, I needed equipment beyond what I owned. The biggest investment was a special macro lens that cost $700. For 2 years, I'd saved every dollar from my part-time job at the local grocery store, birthday money from relatives, even loose change found in couch cushions. Finally, 3 months before the competition deadline, I had saved enough to buy the lens. When I brought it home, I kept it in its special case, tucked safely inside my photography bag. This lens was my ticket to capturing the images I saw in my mind. Around that time, Stephanie introduced us to her new boyfriend, Jackson. He seemed nice enough, quiet, polite, but I noticed something curious in the way he watched her when she talked about me. A slight furrowing of his brow, a barely visible tightening of his jaw. It was clear he wasn't entirely buying the story she was selling. One evening, when Stephanie went to the kitchen to grab drinks, Jackson turned to me and said quietly, "Your photos on the living room wall are amazing. Stephanie mentioned you just point and shoot, but there's obviously so much more to them." Before I could respond, Stephanie returned, and Jackson immediately went back to playing the supportive boyfriend. Still, that brief moment gave me hope that someone else was beginning to see through my sister's facade. Despite everything, I tried to keep the peace. I didn't want to give Stephanie more ammunition or disappoint my parents further. I focused on my photography, spent time with Leah and my other friends, visited Grandma Grace as often as I could, and counted down the days until graduation, when I could finally escape this toxic environment. During one of my visits to Grandma Grace's house, I finally broke down and told her everything. The constant sabotage, the false accusations, the rumors at school, and my fears about the upcoming competition. Grandma listened quietly, her weathered hands folded in her lap. When I finished, she removed her reading glasses and looked me straight in the eye. Some people are so empty inside that they can only feel full by emptying others. Your sister is showing signs of something I saw in my own sister years ago. It isn't just jealousy, it's something deeper. Something in her tone frightened me. I'm worried about the competition, I confessed. I worked so hard, and this scholarship could change everything for me. Grandma Grace squeezed my hand. Trust your instincts, but don't let fear stop you from shining. Maybe keep your most precious things here with me for safekeeping, just until the competition is over. I considered it, but ultimately decided against it. The idea of not having my equipment readily available with only 3 weeks left before the submission deadline made me anxious. Besides, even Stephanie wouldn't go so far as to sabotage something this important to my future, right? How wrong I was. The final countdown to the competition had begun. 3 weeks, then 2, then just days. I had been shooting non-stop, carefully crafting my Resilience series. The portraits from the women's shelter were even more powerful than I had imagined, each one a story of survival and strength. I complemented them with nature shots symbolizing resilience, an oak tree growing stubbornly through a crack in concrete, new growth sprouting from a burned forest, a single dandelion pushing through asphalt. My special macro lens allowed me to capture details that turned ordinary subjects into extraordinary images. The texture of a weathered hand, the reflection in a tear about to fall, the intricate pattern of a healing scar. That lens wasn't just a piece of equipment. It was the tool that allowed me to translate my vision into reality. 3 days before the submission deadline, I came home from school eager to begin my final editing session. All my images were safely stored on my camera, my laptop, and a backup memory card I kept in a small tin in my desk. I'd been meticulous with backups, knowing how much was riding on this project. But when I opened my photography bag, my heart stopped. The lens case was empty. My $700 macro lens, the one I had saved for over 2 years, was gone. My first instinct was to check everywhere. Maybe I had taken it out and forgotten. I tore apart my room, under the bed, in drawers, on shelves. Nothing. Panic rising, I searched the rest of the house, the living room, kitchen, even the bathroom. The lens was nowhere to be found. Stephanie was home from college that day, lounging on the couch watching television. I approached her, trying to keep my voice calm. "Steph, have you seen my camera lens, the special one I bought for the competition?" She didn't even look away from the screen. "Why would you have my photography stuff? Maybe you left it at school." Something in her tone made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. But I had no proof, and accusing her would only backfire, as it always had. My next step was to check my backup memory card. Even without the lens, I could still submit the photos I had already taken. They weren't perfect, but they were good. When I opened the tin where I kept the card, my stomach dropped. It was gone, too. Dread settled in my gut like a stone. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone had deliberately taken both my lens and my backup card, and there was only one person who would benefit from sabotaging my competition entry. When my parents came home, I told them what had happened. Mom looked concerned but distracted as she sorted the mail. Dad frowned. "Are you sure you didn't just misplace them?" "You do tend to be careless with your things, Tommy," he said, not unkindly, but with a dismissiveness that stung. "That lens was expensive. You should have been more careful." "I know exactly where I left it," I insisted with my voice rising. "Someone took it, and my memory card." Dad's frown deepened. "Are you suggesting someone broke into our house to steal a camera lens and a memory card, but nothing else?" From the couch, Stephanie sighed dramatically. She always does this, loses things and then blames others. I wanted to scream that she was the thief, that she'd been undermining me for years, but I knew exactly how that would end. Instead, I retreated to my room, closed the door, and allowed myself 5 minutes of panic and tears. Then I called Leah. Leah, being the incredible friend she was, immediately offered a solution.
Her cousin, a professional photographer, lived an hour away. She could ask him to lend me his macro lens for a few days. It wouldn't be exactly like mine, but close enough. As for the missing memory card, most of my photos were still on my laptop.
I'd have to retake a few that hadn't been transferred yet, but it was doable. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, with Mrs. Lawson's permission, I skipped classes, and Leah's cousin drove down to deliver the borrowed lens. I spent the entire day and night reshooting the missing images, then another full day editing. By the final day before the deadline, I had pieced together my submission. It wasn't what I had originally envisioned. The rushed reshoot lacked some of the emotional depth of my earlier work, but it was still strong. I stayed awake for 48 hours straight to finish everything. When I finally hit submit on the competition website, just 3 hours before the deadline, exhaustion hit me like a physical wave. But alongside it came relief. Despite the sabotage, I had managed to submit my work. I hadn't let Stephanie win. Dragging myself home, barely able to keep my eyes open, all I wanted was to collapse into bed and sleep for days. But as soon as I walked through the front door, I was jolted wide awake. Stephanie sat on the couch, face buried in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. Mom was beside her, arm around her shoulders. Dad stood nearby, his expression darker than I had ever seen it. The air was thick with tension. Something was very wrong. Mom looked up at me, her eyes filled with disappointment and anger. "Where have you been?" she demanded. "We've been trying to reach you for hours." I was about to explain about the competition when Stephanie lifted her tear-streaked face. Her eyes met mine, and I saw something there that chilled me to the bone. Behind the fake tears was satisfaction, triumph even. "How could you?" she choked out between sobs. "I trusted you." I stood frozen in the entryway, my camera bag still slung over my shoulder. No idea what was happening, but knowing instinctively I was walking into a trap. Dad stepped forward, his voice tight with restrained fury. "Your sister has something to tell us, and you have some explaining to do." Through expertly crafted sobs, Stephanie told a story that made my blood run cold. According to her, she had been saving money for a special spring break trip with her college friends, $2,000 kept in an envelope in her desk drawer. This was the first I'd heard of any such trip or savings, yet my parents were nodding along as if this was common knowledge. I needed to get some papers from my desk and noticed the envelope felt light. I opened it and the money was gone, all of it. $2,000 I saved from my Tampus job over the past year. My father paced the living room, his face reddening with each passing second. Mom kept rubbing Stephanie's back, murmuring comforting words. I didn't know what to say. This was clearly another setup, but one far more serious than missing earrings or a stained sweater. She'd raised the stakes to actual theft, a criminal accusation. "I had nothing to do with this," I said firmly. "I didn't even know you were saving for a trip." Stephanie looked up with perfect indignation. "Don't lie on top of stealing. I told everyone about my Cancun trip plans at Christmas dinner. You were sitting right there." Had she mentioned a trip at Christmas? Maybe vaguely, but certainly not specific savings or amounts. Yet my parents were, again, nodding along as if this was established fact. Then Stephanie delivered the killing blow. "I didn't want to believe it was you," she said, wiping away tears. "But then I found these in your photography bag when I was looking for clues." She reached beside the couch and held up several empty envelopes with dates and amounts written in her handwriting. My stomach dropped. She must have planted them in my bag while I was out reshooting my project. "That's not mine," I protested. "I've never seen those before. She put them there." Dad stopped pacing and turned to me, his expression thunderous. "This has gone far enough. We're going to search your room." Before I could object further, he marched upstairs with Mom following. I stood rooted to the spot, my mind racing. This couldn't be happening, but it was.
The sounds of drawers opening and closet doors banging filtered down from upstairs. Stephanie remained on the couch, no longer sobbing, but watching me with an almost imperceptible smirk. "You won't find anything, because I didn't take anything," I said to her when our parents were out of earshot. She shrugged one shoulder. "We both know the truth doesn't always matter, Tammy. It's what people believe that counts." Minutes later, my father's voice boomed from upstairs. "Tammy, get up here now." I climbed the stairs with leaden feet, already knowing this wouldn't end well. My room was in disarray, drawers pulled out, belongings scattered across the bed and floor. My parents stood in front of my open closet. Mom was holding something in her hands, her expression a mixture of sadness and disgust. It was my special macro lens, the lens that had disappeared 3 days ago, that I had torn the house apart looking for, that had forced me to borrow equipment and reshoot my entire project. Somehow it was now in my closet, tucked inside a winter boot I rarely wore. "That's impossible," I whispered, staring at the lens in disbelief. "I looked everywhere. It wasn't there." Dad crossed his arms over his chest. "Just like you know nothing about the money." I tried to make them understand, explaining about the competition, the missing lens, the frantic reshooting, but my words seemed to bounce off them as if they were encased in bulletproof glass. Then came the final nail in the coffin. Mom pulled a piece of paper out of her pocket, a printout of what appeared to be a bank statement with my name on it, showing a deposit of $2,000 made 2 days ago. "We found this in your desk," she said quietly. "How do you explain this?" I stared at the paper, completely bewildered. I didn't have a secret bank account. The statement was obviously fake, but it looked convincingly real with the bank logo and all the right formatting. Stephanie had gone to extraordinary lengths this time. "That's not mine," I insisted with my voice rising with desperation. "I don't have that account. This is all a setup. Stephanie is framing me because she doesn't want me to win the photography competition." Even as the words left my mouth, I could see they sounded paranoid and far-fetched to my parents. Why would a 20-year-old college student go to such elaborate lengths to sabotage her 16-year-old sister? But the truth was so much simpler than they realized. Stephanie couldn't stand to see me succeed, to see me potentially earn recognition and a scholarship. Her jealousy had festered for years, and now it had erupted into this elaborate scheme. The argument escalated quickly. I became increasingly frantic as I tried to make them see the truth. Dad became angrier, his voice rising to a shout. Mom started crying, saying she didn't know where they had gone wrong with me. "There's been money missing from my purse too," Mom said suddenly. "Small amounts I thought I'd misplaced or miscounted. Was that you too?" "No, I would never steal from you, from anyone." "Then explain this." Dad thrust the fake bank statement in my face. "Explain the lens hidden in your closet." "I told you, Stephanie planted those things. I didn't know about any money. I didn't hide my own lens. Why would I do that when I needed it for the most important photography project of my life?" Dad slammed his hand against the wall, making me jump. "I am sick of the lies and the accusations against your sister. You have been nothing but trouble while she works hard at college and saves her money." It was as if I was watching the scene from outside my body. How could they not see what was happening? How could they believe I would steal from my own family, then hide the evidence so poorly it could be found in 5 minutes of searching? I couldn't breathe. The walls of my bedroom seemed to close in. 16 years of life in this house, and it had all come down to this moment. My parents looking at me like I was a stranger, a thief, a liar. As a final desperate measure, I pulled out my phone. "Let me call Grandma Grace. She knows I'm telling the truth." Dad snatched the phone from my hand. "You are not dragging your grandmother into this mess. You have broken your mother's heart and stolen from your sister, who has done nothing but support you." "Support me?" I laughed incredulously. She has been sabotaging me for years, and now she's framed me for theft. That was when Dad snapped completely. I want you out of this house, he said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. Pack a bag and get out. Mom gasped. Frank, no, it's February. Where will she go? I don't care. She can go to a friend's. She can sleep on a park bench for all I care. But I will not have a thief under my roof. I stared at him in disbelief. You can't kick me out. I'm 16. Your daughter. His face was like stone. I don't know who you are anymore. You have 15 minutes to pack essential items and leave. With that, he walked out of my room. Mom lingered, looking torn. For a moment, I thought she might defend me, might see the truth. Instead, she shook her head sadly. Why couldn't you have been more like your sister? She whispered, before following. I stood alone in my ransacked room, my world collapsing around me. Through the open door, I could see Stephanie at the top of the stairs. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her eyes said it all. She had won. In a daze, I grabbed my school backpack and stuffed it with a change of clothes, my toothbrush, and the few valuables I couldn't bear to leave behind. A photo of Grandma Grace, my first place certificate from a photography contest, the memory card from my camera that still had some of my images. I changed into jeans and a sweater. But before I could find my winter coat, Dad was back at my door. Time's up. Out now. I need my coat. It's freezing outside. You should have thought about that before you stole $2,000. He took my arm and guided me none too gently down the stairs and to the front door. Mom stood in the kitchen doorway, her face turned away. Stephanie was nowhere to be seen. At the door, Dad handed me $20. That's all you're getting from me. Consider yourself lucky I don't call the police. I took the money mechanically, still not fully processing what was happening. Can I at least have my shoes? I asked, looking down at my sock-covered feet. Dad glanced down, seemed to consider for a moment, then opened the door. The February wind immediately cut through my sweater. You have caused enough damage to this family. Go. With that, he gave me a slight push over the threshold and closed the door. I heard the lock click into place. I stood on the front porch of my childhood home, barefoot in the snow, with nothing but a backpack and $20. Through the living room window, I could see Stephanie watching me. Our eyes met, and she slowly pulled the curtain closed. The full impact of what had just happened hit me like a physical blow. My sister had systematically destroyed my reputation, framed me for a theft I didn't commit, and gotten me thrown out of my home in the middle of winter without even shoes on my feet. And my parents, the people who were supposed to protect me no matter what, had believed her lies without question. The humiliation was as bitter as the cold seeping through my socks. Mrs. Miller from next door was getting her mail and stared at me with undisguised curiosity. Down the street, a car slowed as it passed our house, the driver craning their neck to watch the unfolding drama. In a small town, news of my disgrace would spread like wildfire. With nowhere else to go and my feet already going numb, I started walking toward Leah's house, leaving small sock-shaped prints in the snow behind me. The 1.5 miles to Leah's house was the longest journey of my life. February in Pennsylvania is unforgiving, with temperatures well below freezing and a wind that cuts like broken glass. Within minutes, I couldn't feel my toes. Within 10, each step was agony as my feet cycled between numbness and stabbing pain. I tried to walk faster to generate heat, but the sidewalks were icy in patches, and without shoes, I had no traction. Twice I slipped and fell, scraping my hands on the frozen concrete. My tears froze on my cheeks almost as quickly as they fell. Cars passed me on the road, but I kept my head down, too ashamed to make eye contact with anyone who might recognize me, the barefoot girl kicked out of her own home. My thoughts were a jumbled mess of disbelief, anger, and crushing heartbreak. How had my family turned on me so completely? How had Stephanie engineered such a perfect frame job? What would happen to me now? By the time I reached Leah's neighborhood, I was shivering violently. My jeans were wet from the snow, my fingers stiff with cold. I couldn't feel my feet at all, which I knew from basic first aid class was a dangerous sign. I stumbled up the driveway to Leah's house and rang the doorbell, leaning heavily against the porch column to stay upright. When Leah's mom, Mrs. Anderson, opened the door, her expression changed from welcome to horror in an instant. "Oh my God, Tammy," she exclaimed, pulling me inside. "Where are your shoes? You're blue with cold." I tried to explain, but my teeth were chattering too hard to form coherent sentences. Mrs. Anderson called for her husband and Leah while wrapping me in the throw blanket from their couch. Mr. Anderson, a former Army medic, took one look at me and went into action mode. He carried me to their bathroom, where he filled the tub with lukewarm water. That's when I saw my feet. They were an angry red with white patches, the early signs of frostbite. Mr. Anderson gently placed my feet in the water, explaining that warming them too quickly could cause more damage.
The pain, as feeling returned, was excruciating. I bit my lip to keep from crying out. Leah sat on the bathroom floor beside me, holding my hand while her parents tended to my feet. Only when the worst of the physical crisis had passed did they ask for the full story. Through tears and with a voice that kept breaking, I told them everything. The years of Stephanie's jealousy, the escalating sabotage, the missing lens and memory card, the false accusation of stealing money, and finally being thrown out barefoot in the snow. Leah's family listened without interruption, their expressions growing increasingly concerned. "Your father sent you out without shoes in February?" Mrs. Anderson said, her voice tight with anger. "That is beyond unacceptable. That's child endangerment." Mr. Anderson nodded grimly. "I should call Child Protective Services." "No," I protested, panic rising. "Please don't. I don't want to make things worse." They exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Mr. Anderson sighed. "We won't do anything without talking it through with you first. But Tammy, what your parents did was wrong on every level. And your sister?" He shook his head, seemingly at a loss for words. Mrs. Anderson wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "You'll stay here tonight, of course. We've got the guest room all made up. Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps." That night, after borrowing pajamas from Leah and having my feet bandaged, I lay awake in their guest room staring at the ceiling. The bed was comfortable, the room warm, but I felt completely adrift. Less than 24 hours ago, I had a home, a family, and what I thought was a secure place in the world. Now everything had shattered, and I had no idea how to put the pieces back together. The next morning, with feet too swollen to fit in borrowed shoes, I stayed at Leah's while her parents went to work and she went to school. Mrs. Anderson had called the school to explain my absence, though I begged her not to share the full details. The last thing I needed was for everyone to know I'd been thrown out of my house like trash. I spent the day trying to contact my parents. I called our home phone repeatedly, but no one answered. I sent text messages that showed as delivered but went unread. I even tried emailing my mom at her work address. Nothing. It was as if I had ceased to exist for them. In desperation, I tried calling Grandma Grace, but got her answering machine. She was probably at her weekly bridge game, unaware that my granddaughter's world had collapsed. Days passed in a strange, suspended state. Leah's family was incredibly kind, insisting I stay as long as needed. Mr. Anderson drove by my house while I waited in the car, only to report that my parents had already changed the locks. My key no longer worked. Through Leah, I learned that Stephanie had told people at our old high school that I had stolen money and run away in shame. The story was spreading, damaging my reputation beyond repair. After a week, I forced myself to return to school, despite the humiliation. I needed to maintain some semblance of normalcy to keep up with my classes if I had any hope of salvaging my future. Walking through those hallways was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I could feel the stares, hear the whispers. The girl who stole from her own sister, the thief who got kicked out of her house. What had once been a place where I excelled had become a gauntlet of judgment and speculation. Mrs. Lawson, my photography teacher, was one of the few bright spots. She didn't ask for details, but offered her classroom as a safe space during lunch and free periods.
In her quiet way, she let me know she believed in me regardless of the rumors. Then came news about the photography competition. Against all odds, despite the sabotage and rushed resubmission, my Resilience series had made it to the finals. Under different circumstances, this would have been cause for celebration. Instead, it felt like a cruel joke. What good was recognition when my life was in shambles? The awards ceremony was scheduled for the following month at a gallery in Philadelphia. The finalists were expected to attend and speak about their work. The thought of standing in front of strangers and talking about resilience when I felt anything but resilient was overwhelming. But Mrs. Lawson gently insisted, "This is your work, Tammy, your vision. Don't let what happened rob you of this moment. I'll drive you there myself if needed." As the ceremony approached, my anxiety grew, not just about public speaking, but about potentially seeing my family there. Would they come to support me despite everything? Would they use the opportunity to publicly denounce me? Or worse, would they not come at all, confirming that I truly no longer mattered to them? Depression settled on me like a heavy cloak. I went through the motions of daily life, attending classes, completing assignments, thanking Leah's family for their continued hospitality, but inside I felt hollow. I had lost 15 pounds. I couldn't afford to lose the borrowed clothes hanging loosely on my frame. Sleep eluded me most nights, and when it did come, nightmares of being barefoot in the snow jolted me awake, heart racing. The day of the ceremony arrived crisp and clear, a perfect early spring day that seemed to mock my internal darkness. Mrs. Lawson had arranged for Leah to be excused from classes so she could accompany me. Leah's parents had bought me a simple but elegant dress for the occasion, despite my protests that they had already done too much. As we drove to Philadelphia, I stared out the window at the passing landscape, wondering how my life had veered so drastically off course. One minute, I had a normal teenager with dreams and plans. The next, I was essentially homeless, relying on the charity of my best friend's family, about to attend a prestigious photography ceremony while carrying the weight of false accusations and family betrayal. The gallery was crowded with people, photographers, judges, and proud families of the other finalists. I searched the room involuntarily, looking for familiar faces. No sign of my parents or Stephanie. A mix of relief and fresh hurt washed over me. Then, as we moved toward the display of finalist photographs, I spotted a head of silver hair that I would recognize anywhere. Grandma Grace was standing in front of my photo series, studying the images with intense concentration. My heart leapt to my throat. "Grandma," I called out, my voice breaking. She turned, and the love and concern in her eyes nearly undid me. She opened her arms, and I walked into her embrace, finally allowing myself to fully break down for the first time since that terrible night. The ceremony passed in a blur. I somehow made it through my brief speech about my Resilience series, though I have no memory of what I actually said. I didn't win the top prize. That went to a boy from Seattle with a powerful series on homelessness. But I received an honorable mention and a smaller scholarship of $5,000. Under the circumstances, it felt like a miracle. Throughout the event, Grandma Grace sat in the front row between Leah and Mrs. Lawson, beaming with pride. The absence of my parents and sister was a palpable void, but having my grandma there cushioned the blow. After the ceremony, as people mingled and admired the photographs, Grandma Grace pulled me aside.
Her face was serious, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and determination I'd never seen before. "I tried calling your parents dozens of times after I got your messages," she said. "They gave me some nonsense about you stealing money and needing tough love." She spat out the last two words like they tasted bitter. I knew immediately something wasn't right. "You are many things, Tommy, but a thief isn't one of them." Tears welled in my eyes again. "I've been staying with Leah's family. Mom and Dad changed the locks. They won't even talk to me." Grandma Grace's mouth set in a hard line. "This ends now. You're coming home with me." I started to protest. I couldn't impose on her. Her house was small, and at 76, she didn't need the burden of a teenager. But Grandma Grace cut me off with a wave of her hand. I'm not asking, Tommy. I'm telling you. You are my granddaughter, and your place is with family. Real family. I didn't raise my daughter to throw her child out in the snow, and I won't stand by while you suffer. Her tone broke no argument, and truthfully, the prospect of having a stable place to call home again with someone who actually believed in me was too tempting to resist. I nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. The next day, after tearful thanks and promises to stay in touch with Leah's family, I moved into Grandma Grace's cozy bungalow. She cleared out her sewing room to make space for me, hanging curtains and putting fresh sheets on the daybed that would now be mine. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night without nightmares. Life settled into a new routine. I continued attending my high school, with Grandma Grace driving me each morning despite the extra distance. Her house was outside our school district, but with only a few months left until graduation, the administration made an exception given the circumstances. My grades, which had slipped during the worst of the crisis, began to improve again. At home with Grandma Grace, I felt safe. We developed our own rhythms, making dinner together while listening to her old jazz records, watching classic movies on Friday nights, tending her small garden as spring bloomed in earnest. She never pushed me to talk about what had happened, but she was always ready to listen when I needed to vent or cry. About a month after moving in, I was in my room working on a history paper when I heard the doorbell ring. Voices floated up from downstairs, my grandmother's and then others that made my blood run cold. My parents and Stephanie. I froze, my heart pounding. Were they here to accuse me of something else? To try to convince Grandma Grace to kick me out too? I crept to my bedroom door and opened it a crack, listening. They had come for Sunday dinner, apparently at my grandmother's invitation. I hadn't known she was planning this and felt a flash of betrayal. But as I listened more, I realized this might have been Grandma Grace's way of trying to mend fences, to get my family to see reason. I heard them settle in the living room, my grandmother offering drinks and making stilted small talk. I had no desire to join them, to see the disappointment in my parents' eyes or the smug satisfaction in Stephanie's. I decided to stay hidden upstairs until they left. After about 20 minutes, I heard Stephanie excuse herself to use the bathroom. The bathroom was downstairs, but to my horror, I heard footsteps on the stairs. I quickly shut my door, heart racing. The footsteps passed my room and continued down the hall. What was she doing up here? Curious and concerned, I slipped out of my room and followed quietly. Stephanie had her phone to her ear, speaking in a low voice, clearly not wanting to be overheard downstairs. She had stepped into Grandma Grace's bedroom at the end of the hall, leaving the door slightly ajar. I edged closer, staying out of sight. Stephanie's voice became clearer. I know, right? They totally bought it. You should have seen her face when they found the lens in her closet, priceless. And that fake bank statement you helped me make looked so real. She laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. She literally got thrown out without shoes. In February. I didn't expect them to go that far, but it worked out even better than I planned. The best part is, she's completely cut off now. They changed the locks and everything. No way is she getting that scholarship or going to college before me. Another laugh, colder this time. No, they have no idea. They think their perfect Stephanie is the victim. As if I actually saved money for a spring break trip. That $2,000 is paying for our real trip this summer, babe. She paused for a moment, then continued. I had to. She was always the favorite, even if they pretended otherwise. Little Miss Perfect with her photography and her grades. You should have seen how Dad looked at her when she won that stupid contest last year. He never looked at me like that. Never. Her voice had taken on a sharp edge of bitterness that was startling in its intensity. Well, she's nobody's favorite now. God, you should see her photos at that exhibition. They're actually really good. Not that he'll ever admit it, but it doesn't matter. She's done. Even if they eventually forgive her, she's missed all her college application deadlines. By the time she sorts her life out, you'll have graduated and be starting your career. She'll always be playing catch-up.
She stepped past me and pushed open the bedroom door. Stephanie spun around, nearly dropping her phone. Her face went from startled to panicked in an instant. "Grandma, I was just looking for the bathroom." Grandma Grace crossed her arms over her chest. "The bathroom is downstairs, Stephanie, and I think we both know that's not why you're up here. I was just—" She started, but Grandma cut her off. "I heard everything," her voice like ice. "Every single word about how you framed Tammy, how you planted evidence, how you lied about money that never existed." Stephanie's face drained of color. She looked from Grandma Grace to me, standing in the doorway with my phone still recording, and back again. "You don't understand," she stammered. "I was just joking with my friend. It wasn't serious." Grandma Grace's eyebrows shot up. "Joking about getting your 16-year-old sister thrown out in freezing weather without shoes? About deliberately destroying her future? That doesn't sound like any joke I've ever heard." Stephanie backed up until she hit the wall. Her eyes darted around, as if searching for an escape. For the first time in my life, I saw genuine fear on her face. Not the fake tears or manufactured distress she used to manipulate our parents, but real, primal fear. "We are going downstairs," Grandma Grace said, her tone leaving no room for argument. "And you're going to tell your parents exactly what you've done. All of it. Or I will. And believe me, Stephanie, you don't want me to be the one to tell it." Stephanie looked like she might be sick. She drew herself up for one last attempt at defiance. "They won't believe you. They always believe me." Grandma Grace held up her phone. "While I may not understand all this modern technology, I do know how to press record, young lady." She turned the screen towards Stephanie, showing the recording in progress. "And unlike you, I don't bluff." The color drained from Stephanie's face completely. For a moment, I thought she might faint. Then her shoulders slumped in defeat. Without another word, Grandma Grace took Stephanie's arm and guided her firmly toward the stairs. I followed, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. After weeks of pain and isolation, the truth was finally going to come out. But I felt no triumph, only a hollow ache for everything that had been lost. The three of us descended the stairs to where my parents waited, unaware that their world was about to be turned upside down. They looked up in confusion as we entered the living room. Grandma Grace leading a pale and defeated Stephanie by the arm, me following a few steps behind. The pleasant family dinner atmosphere evaporated instantly. "What's going on?" Dad asked, setting down his coffee mug. "Why do you have your hand on Stephanie like that, Mom?" Grandma Grace guided Stephanie to the center of the room. "Your daughter has something to tell you, something she should have admitted months ago." She gave Stephanie a firm look. "Go ahead." Stephanie stood silent, staring at the floor. Mom looked back and forth between them, confusion giving way to concern. "Stephanie, what's wrong? What is this about?" My sister raised her eyes, and I saw calculation there. She was still looking for a way out, a way to spin this to her advantage. But Grandma Grace had positioned herself directly behind Stephanie, her phone visible in her hand. "Tell them, Stephanie," Grandma said. "I will play the recording for them right now." Stephanie took a shuddering breath. "I did something bad," she began, her voice small. "What do you mean?" Dot asked, brow furrowed, halting sentences punctuated by what I recognized as strategic tears. Stephanie began to confess. She admitted to taking my lens and memory card to sabotage my competition entry. She admitted to creating a fake bank statement and planting empty envelopes in my bag. She admitted to hiding the lens in my closet where it would easily be found. Even in confession, she tried to minimize. "I just wanted to mess up her photography thing. I didn't think you'd actually kick her out." Dad went completely still, his face unreadable. Mom had her hand pressed to her mouth, eyes wide with horror. "That's not all," Grandma said. "Tell them why." Stephanie looked down again. "I was jealous, okay? She was going to win that scholarship and go to some fancy art school while I'm stuck at community college. Everyone always thought she was so special, so talented. I just wanted her to know what it felt like to be second best for once." Mom made a choked sound. "But the money, the $2,000, you said she stole." Stephanie bit her lip.
There wasn't any money. I made it up. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad stood up slowly, his face now flushed with anger, but this time it was directed at the right person. Are you telling me that you deliberately framed your sister? That you lied to us, manipulated us into throwing her out of her own home, all for a competition? Stephanie must have sensed the tide turning against her because she made one last attempt at salvage. She turned to me, tears streaming now. I'm sorry, Tammy. I never meant it for it to go this far. I was just angry and jealous, and it got out of hand. The apology rang hollow, especially after what I had overheard upstairs. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a prank gone wrong. This was a calculated campaign to destroy my future, executed over weeks or even months. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain and humiliation I had endured. Another part of me was simply exhausted, drained by weeks of emotional turmoil. In the end, all I said was, "You were my sister. I looked up to you." Something flickered in Stephanie's eyes. Regret, perhaps, or just recognition that her carefully constructed world was crumbling. Dad began pacing the room, running his hands through his hair in distress. Mom was openly crying now. We threw our daughter out in the snow, without shoes in February. My God, what have we done? Dad stopped pacing and turned to me. His face had aged years in minutes. The lines around his mouth and eyes suddenly deeper, more pronounced. When he spoke, his voice thick with emotion, he said, "Tammy, I don't know if you can ever forgive us for what we did. I have no excuse. We believed the worst of you without evidence, without even giving you a fair hearing. We failed you completely as parents." I stood there uncertain how to respond. The validation of finally being believed warred with the lingering hurt of their ready assumption of my guilt. They had chosen Stephanie over me so easily, so completely. That wound wouldn't heal with a single apology. Grandma Grace stepped in, her voice gentle but firm. "I think what's important now is what happens next. Tammy has been through a traumatic experience.
She needs stability, support, and time to heal." Dad nodded visibly, pulling himself together. "Of course, Tammy should come home immediately. We'll make this right, whatever it takes." But Grandma Grace shook her head. "I don't think that's the best solution, Frank. Not yet. Tammy has started to rebuild her life with me. She's feeling safe for the first time in weeks. Uprooting her again, putting her back in a house with Stephanie, expecting her to just pick up where she left off, that's asking too much." Mom's head snapped up. "But she's our daughter. Her place is with us." "Her place," Grandma Grace said evenly, "is where she feels secure and valued. Right now, that's with me. I raised you better than this, Margaret. Both of you." She gestured to include Dad. "I never thought I'd see the day when my own daughter would turn her back on her child based on nothing but the word of another." "What about Stephanie?" Dad asked, looking at my sister with new, critical eyes. "What do we do about this?" Grandma Grace considered for a moment. "That's for you to decide as her parents, but there should be consequences, real ones, and she needs professional help to understand why she felt it necessary to hurt her sister so deeply." In the days and weeks that followed, a new reality took shape. I stayed with Grandma Grace to finish my junior year. The guest room became truly mine as I added posters to the walls and arranged my few possessions. My parents returned my belongings, box by box, including my photography equipment. Each delivery felt like both an olive branch and a reminder of what had been broken. Stephanie finally faced consequences. My parents cut off her tuition payments, insisting she take a semester off to work full-time and pay back the cost of my damaged camera equipment. They also required her to attend therapy to address her jealousy and manipulative behavior. She complained bitterly, but for once our parents held firm. My relationship with my parents entered a fragile reconstruction phase.
They called daily at first, then settled into weekly dinners at Grandma Grace's house. They tried so hard, apologizing repeatedly, asking about my photography, taking an interest in my life in ways they never had before. I appreciated the effort, but couldn't ignore that it had taken a dramatic rupture for them to see me clearly. As for Stephanie, our relationship remained strained. Her apologies sounded rehearsed and hollow. In private moments, I glimpsed the same resentment in her eyes. Some fundamental brokenness between us couldn't be easily fixed. Perhaps it never could. The $5,000 honorable mention prize from the photography competition went directly into my college fund. Mrs. Lawson helped me research schools with strong photography programs, and Grandma Grace promised to contribute whatever she could. The path forward wasn't easy or certain, but it existed. By senior year, I had established a new normal. I transferred to my high school in Grandma's district, leaving behind the whispers and speculation. I made new friends, joined the yearbook committee as a photographer, and began building a portfolio for college applications. Slowly, the nightmares about being thrown out in the snow faded. The pain didn't disappear, but it became something I carried rather than something that consumed me. Over time, I realized that while blood connects family members, it doesn't automatically create the bonds of trust and unconditional love we associate with family. Sometimes those bonds must be earned. Sometimes the family that truly supports you isn't the one you're born into, but the one that stands by you when everything falls apart. Grandma Grace became my rock, my safe harbor, my greatest champion. Without her intervention, I might have lost not just my home, but my sense of self, my future, my belief that truth eventually prevails. Today, 16 years later, I'm a successful photographer with my own studio. I specialize in portrait photography that captures people's authentic selves, looking beyond facades to the truth beneath. My work has been featured in galleries across the country, and last year I published my first book of photographs. My relationship with my parents healed. To a point. We see each other on holidays and special occasions. They're proud of my success, though a shadow remains, a memory of their fundamental failure at a crucial moment. I've forgiven them as much as I can, understanding they too were victims of Stephanie's manipulation, though that doesn't excuse their choices. Stephanie and I maintain a distant, civil relationship. She eventually graduated college, married, and works in marketing. We exchange birthday cards and see each other at family gatherings. But the closeness that should exist between sisters never returned. Some betrayals cut too deep. Grandma Grace lived to see my first gallery exhibition. She passed away peacefully 3 years ago, but not before teaching me the most valuable lesson. Resilience isn't just about surviving hardship. It's about maintaining your integrity and compassion even when others fail you. The 16-year-old girl who walked barefoot through the snow, humiliated and abandoned, could never have imagined the life I have now. The journey from there to here wasn't easy, but it forged me into someone stronger, more compassionate, and more discerning about where to place my trust. If you're going through your own dark winter right now, remember this: spring always comes eventually. The truth has a way of surfacing, even when it seems hopelessly buried. And sometimes the family that saves you isn't the one you expected. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted? How did you find your way forward? I would love to hear your stories in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear that they're not alone. Remember, your resilience is your greatest strength.